Welcome. Today we will delve into the epicenter of one of the key battles of World War II, the naval battle at Guadalcanal, which forever changed the course of history in the Pacific theater. On this night, the fate of empires hung in the balance. The Japanese fleet under Admiral Abe launched all its forces to bomb Henderson Field airfield and secure its strategic initiative. The American squadron under Commander Callan, despite having fewer resources, intercepted the Japanese fleet, halting them in the midst of their attack. Why were these few ships able to defeat a numerically superior enemy? How did radar, a hidden secret, become the decisive weapon in this night battle? And why did the Japanese fleet, despite all its advantages, suffer a defeat that shifted the balance of power in the Pacific? Ultimately, what lies behind the strategy that determined the fate of millions? And why did this battle become a turning point in naval warfare history? In this video, we will analyze every detail, every technology, and every decision to reveal the true story of that night, which forever changed the course of the war. Are you ready to uncover what is hidden in archives and at the front lines of battle? Then let's begin. In the quiet silence of the night, when stars still flickered slowly over the silent surface of the Pacific Ocean, one of the most fateful battles of World War II erupted on the horizon. It was not just an episode of military action, not another conflict between ships and aircraft, but a clash of two worlds, the Japanese and the Americans, that determined the course of the entire Pacific campaign. Guadalcanal, an island shrouded in myths and legends, became a symbol of resolve, bravery, and technological breakthrough. Its strategic importance was obvious. Control over this tiny piece of land meant dominance over key sea routes and influence over further advances into the depths of the Pacific. At a time when the fate of millions hung by a thread, the battle for Guadalcanal was not just a point on the map, but a true test of human will and technological might. And it was here, on the night from November 13 to 14, that the first major naval engagement took place, shocking the world with its brutality and unpredictability. This night marked a turning point when the Japanese fleet, commanded by Admiral Hiroaki Abe, took a daring and desperate step, attempting to break through American forces to shell Henderson Field and deliver reinforcements. The Japanese flotilla moved like a shadow, hidden in the darkness, ships slicing through the water like predatory shadows, hoping to catch the Americans off guard. Their goal was clear: to destroy the strategic target, ensure the success of the landing, and strengthen positions in the heart of the Pacific. But the American squadron, despite being outnumbered, was prepared for battle. Under Admiral Daniel J. Callan's command, they advanced to meet the enemy, trusting in their training and the latest technologies. Part 2 of 14. In a situation where most soldiers and commanders understood that victory depended not only on numbers, but also on tactics and technology, these factors played a crucial role. The battle erupted in the shadows of the night. The sounds of gunfire, the roar of explosions, the whistling of rockets, all blended into chaos that was difficult to comprehend and predict. Despite their smaller size and fewer ships, American vessels managed to intercept the Japanese fleet. Their success was no coincidence. The victory was based not only on bravery and determination, but also on a technological breakthrough, radar, which was just beginning to be integrated into combat practice. This new technology allowed the Americans to detect the enemy earlier than they could approach their target. Radar stations, like eyes, recognized the silhouettes of Japanese ships in the darkness, giving the American fleet the opportunity to prepare in advance and launch a counterattack. Meanwhile, the Japanese fleet, relying on more traditional navigation and reconnaissance methods, found itself trapped by its own superiority. Their numerical advantage, which seemed unquestionable, could not compensate for the lack of information, tactical flexibility, and modern technology. As a result, the Japanese fleet suffered heavy losses. The Americans lost several ships, including destroyers such as USS Atlanta and USS Juneau, as well as the damaged heavy cruiser South Dakota. But most importantly, the Japanese plan was foiled, and their seemingly unstoppable advance turned into defeat. The American success was cemented by the destruction of the Japanese cruiser Hiei, a powerful and formidable vessel, shot down with the help of aircraft from Henderson Field Airstrip. This event became not only a tactical victory, but also a symbol of technological progress that changed the course of naval battles. Within a few hours, the Japanese fleet lost its strength, and all thanks to new radar capabilities, artillery accuracy, and the bravery of American sailors. However, control over Guadalcanal was not merely a matter of tactics or technology. This island was a strategic hub, playing a key role in the entire Pacific War. Its influence on the further advance of troops, control over maritime communications, and the possibility of landing new forces made Guadalcanal the subject of fierce fighting and relentless battles. No participant in the conflict could afford to make a mistake because the cost was too high. The strategic importance of this tiny island became increasingly evident as events unfolded. That is why the following night was no less decisive. The night from November 14 to 15 marked a new, more extensive battle. The Japanese fleet, led by Admiral Kirishima, made a desperate attempt to bomb Henderson Airstrip and land reinforcements. With numerical superiority and numerous ships, the Japanese seemed confident of victory. However, their expectations were deceived. The American fleet, strengthened by knowledge of the enemy and equipped with the latest technology, met the foe along its path. Once again, technology played a decisive role. Radar, navigation systems, and artillery accuracy. Despite their numerical superiority, the Japanese ships were intercepted and defeated by the Americans, suffering devastating losses. During this night engagement, the Japanese fleet lost several vessels, some of which were damaged beyond repair and could no longer get back on course. The Americans, despite losing 4 destroyers, maintained operational capability and control of the situation. This victory was not just another tactical success. It signified that control over Guadalcanal had finally shifted into American hands. Ultimately, despite heavy losses, damaged ships and lost vessels, the Allies managed to preserve and strengthen their positions. History has shown that even with fewer forces, limited resources, and technological disadvantages, determination, strategy, and innovation can change the outcome of a battle. Later, this battle became a turning point, the beginning of a series of victories that ultimately led the Americans to consolidate their position in the Pacific, lay the groundwork for the final defeat of Japanese imperialism, and open a new chapter in military history. It was here, in the shadows of night, amidst the roar of weapons and the thoughts of commanders, that a new image of war was taking shape. A war where technology and courage went hand in hand, where the fate of entire nations was decided not only on the battlefield, but also in laboratories, command centers, and strategic decisions. Guadalcanal became a symbol of this new era, an era when victory was determined not only by strength, but also by the ability to seize every opportunity, every technological innovation, every second. This story, told with precision and drama, reminds us that in war, victory belongs not only to the stronger, but also to the smarter, the adaptable, those unafraid of innovation, and those willing to go to the very end. The greatness of this battle lies in its lessons, its tragedy, and its triumph. In the quiet waters of the southern Pacific Ocean, where the endless blue stretches to the horizon, begins one of the most fateful chapters of World War II. Guadalcanal, an island that, in those years, became more than just a piece of land. It was a strategic point upon which the fate of an entire region, the entire naval map of the world, and ultimately, the course of the war itself depended. In its shadow, the struggle for control over sea routes, the ability to impose one's will on the enemy, and the right to dictate conditions on the vast Pacific arena unfolded. This island, seemingly small, held colossal significance. It connected the United States with Australia and New Guinea, forming a vital axis of defense and offense in a region where every wave could mean victory or defeat. At the heart of this strategic hub was an airfield called Henderson Field, an air citadel that became a key element in the struggle for dominance in the sky and at sea. This airfield was not just a runway for takeoffs and landings. It transformed into a powerful aviation platform capable of protecting naval convoys, supporting ground troops, and striking Japanese forces, making it a vital target for both sides. For the Americans, control over Henderson was an integral part of their plan to continue the offensive, safeguard their communications, and ensure supplies. It became their air shield, allowing them to hold the front line and prevent the Japanese from reaching strategically important regions. For the Japanese Army and Navy, Guadalcanal was not just another island. It was a point that could halt Japanese expansion and prevent the Americans from consolidating their position in the region. By establishing a defensive line, the Japanese hoped to prevent American forces from approaching their islands and resource-rich regions of Southeast Asia. This island became their bastion, their shield, and at the same time a potential trap if it fell under enemy control. Losing Guadalcanal could have not only shifted the balance of power in the Pacific, but also accelerated Japanese expansion and dashed the U.S. plans to regain control over the region. History shows that after the initial clashes, both sides realized that Guadalcanal and Henderson were more than mere points on a map. They became symbols of the struggle for strategic initiative, for control of the sea, and for the ability to set the rules of the game. Both sides understood, if the island was lost, all plans would change, and the outcome of the war in the Pacific would be at risk. Therefore, for the Americans, it became a priority, and they began relentless efforts to strengthen defenses, reinforce their positions, and create formidable defensive lines. Every soldier's decision, every engineering solution, every combat operation, all aimed to hold Guadalcanal at any cost. During the months-long campaign, the Americans actively fortified their positions. They built new defensive structures, established logistics chains, and transported reinforcements from distant parts of the country. Their intelligence, based on intercepting Japanese communications, revealed enemy plans and anticipated their attacks. Evidence shows that despite their superiority in some types of weaponry, the Japanese were unable to quickly capture and hold the island. Why? What was their mistake? How did the Americans, outnumbered, manage to withstand the Japanese onslaught? The answer lies not only in tactics, but also in a deeper understanding of the strategic importance of this tiny island. Control over Guadalcanal changed the course of the war. It marked the beginning of the end of Japanese expansion in the Pacific. American intelligence successfully intercepted Japanese communications, allowing them to anticipate enemy actions and organize their defenses accordingly. As a result, the Battle of Guadalcanal became a turning point that demonstrated even the most powerful armies and fleets cannot win a war without strategic understanding, the ability to utilize information, and quick reaction. In this context, Henderson Field was not just an airfield but a symbol of American resolve, their capacity to leverage technological superiority and tactical mastery. Thanks to these efforts, perseverance, and strategic genius of the command, the Americans managed to establish a foothold on the island, prevent the enemy from breaking through to vital regions, and lay the groundwork for further offensive operations. Although the Japanese began re-evaluating their tactics after initial defeats, their loss at Guadalcanal became a lesson they learned too late. For the United States, victory on this island was not only a tactical success, but also a powerful boost for continuing the fight for regional control and the future of the entire Pacific. On that quiet, seemingly ordinary night, when the stars gently illuminated the sea surface, one of the most tense scenes of World War II unfolded, the first night naval battle at Guadalcanal. This fight was not merely a clash of ships and crews. It was a test of spirit, tactics, and the will to win, which determined the course of the Pacific campaign. It all began with a Japanese order to attack and destroy the American defensive position on Guadalcanal, strengthen their positions, and secure control over a strategically vital zone. Admiral Abe, commander of the Japanese fleet, knew that every minute could be critical. The Japanese fleet, superior in numbers and armament, set out to sea with the resolve to crush the American forces and achieve success. But at that moment, despite having fewer forces and less prepared equipment, the Americans were determined to defend their foothold. When the dark waters trembled from the first shots, tactics that would later become standard in naval warfare emerged. The American command post, located on the island, received a report. The Japanese fleet was approaching. In conditions of poor visibility, when the sky and sea merged into a solid darkness, American destroyers and cruisers, operating at the limit of their capabilities, engaged in combat. They did not seek distance and were unafraid of close contact. In the chaos of the night, illuminated by searchlights and explosions, the Americans employed close-quarters tactics that seemed reckless to many. They headed straight into the heart of the Japanese ships, hoping to intercept them in a hand-to-hand naval clash, where their smaller and more maneuverable vessels could demonstrate their full skill. That night witnessed heroism and tragedy. The Americans lost 3 ships. One of them, the cruiser Atlanta, was struck and sunk under a barrage of Japanese shells. Another, the light cruiser Juno, was lost in fire and storm. Several destroyers, led by determined crews, also fell in battle. Part 6 of 14. 12 officers and 232 sailors were killed in this bloody battle, including 2 admirals who became symbols of resilience and sacrifice. Part of the Japanese fleet was destroyed, but the cost of the battle was high, paid with blood and death by those fighting for every meter of water. A key moment of this night engagement was the attack by American aircraft. At the height of the battle, as sailors on their decks and in command centers clung to the last drops of hope, planes from American aircraft carriers took to the skies. They pierced through the darkness of night, broke the dangerous silence, and struck Japanese cruisers and destroyers. The attack on the cruiser Heiyi was especially significant, a powerful vessel that, despite Japanese training and numerical superiority, was destroyed by explosions and flames. This blow proved decisive. Losing key ships, the Japanese fleet found itself in a state of complete disorganization and incapacity to fight. Why were the Americans able to succeed under such difficult conditions? Why, despite having fewer forces and poor visibility, was their resistance so resilient? The answer lies in a combination of factors: the determination of the crews, tactical ingenuity, precise reconnaissance, and timely command responses. But most importantly, the disorganization of the Japanese fleet played a crucial role. The Japanese, accustomed to stricter discipline and coordination in their operations, faced chaos during the night attack, unprepared for such a battle, with errors in command and insufficient communication between ships. In the darkness and rapid pace of the battle, these shortcomings became especially evident. Aviation, which seemed an auxiliary element, became the decisive factor. Under night conditions, when visibility was minimal, it was the pilots, operating based on navigation signals and accurate intelligence, who delivered devastating strikes. Their attacks destroyed the central part of the Japanese fleet formation, forcing the enemy to retreat. At that moment, Japanese command realized that their strategy had failed. They were forced to abandon their ships and withdraw, losing a significant part of their forces, and more importantly, the opportunity to shell the American air and naval base at Guadalcanal. This battle was not just a single episode. It marked a new era in naval warfare. Despite having fewer forces, the Americans demonstrated that tactics, determination, and the use of aviation could turn the tide of battle. The outcome of the night at Guadalcanal cemented the strategic victory for the United States. They halted the Japanese operation, turned the tide in their favor, and importantly, secured control over the island, which became a key point in the struggle for dominance in the Pacific Ocean. Subsequently, Japanese command revised their naval strategies, realizing that night battles, tactical flexibility, and the timely use of aviation are the new pillars on which success in modern naval combat is built. Part 7 of 14. Immediately after this victory, the Americans began preparing for the next phase of the campaign, strengthening their positions, refining tactics, and most importantly, boosting the morale of their crews, who were ready at any moment to defend their interests, even under the most dangerous conditions. In the dark depths of World War II, when nights became battlefields and silence was the most perilous element of combat, American engineers and strategists initiated a breakthrough that would forever change the course of naval warfare. Radar, this mysterious, almost magical technology capable of seeing in the dark and detecting enemies hundreds of miles away, became not just a tool, but a weapon of a new generation. During the years from 1940 to 1942, when the global conflict reached its peak, the United States actively invested in the development of radar systems, considering them a key technological advantage that could tip the scales in their favor. In conditions where naval battles were often decided at night, in fog, or in bad weather, the ability to detect the enemy without visual contact became critical. It was in this context that the concept of radar was born and developed, which later received its name. Let's look at specific examples. On the decks of two American ships, the battleship USS Washington and the heavy cruiser USS South Dakota, the first serious radar systems were installed. The SG model and the SK system could detect targets at distances of up to 40 miles, even in the most challenging conditions: fog, storms, poor visibility. These systems operated on the principle of reflecting radio waves sent toward the horizon and their return, allowing the determination of the target's location, speed, and even type. For American sailors, it was like seeing in the dark, possessing supernatural vision capable of penetrating fog and night gloom. At a moment when the enemy remained invisible to the human eye, radar provided the ability to fire at targets from distances inaccessible to Japanese ships, whose systems were fragmented, weak, and ineffective. Despite their traditions and technological strength, the Japanese fleet found itself in a position close to defeat, not only due to strategic errors, but also because their radar systems were disjointed and inefficient. Their developments in this area were more experimental, often consisting of isolated prototypes without a unified implementation strategy. The entire Japanese-American naval confrontation demonstrated that whoever first adopted radar gained a tactical and strategic advantage. The secret of implementing this technology, which remained classified until mid-1943, became a true weapon of secrecy. The conspiracy around radar systems was so strict that the enemy even suspected nothing about the scale of development and deployment. This allowed American ships to fight, anticipate enemy movements, even before the enemy realized they had been detected. During training and in actual combat conditions, radar played a decisive role. The evidence is irrefutable. The enemy was detected moments before visual contact, allowing for preparation for battle, the selection of the right tactics, and even the avoidance of dangerous collisions. In night battles, radar became both an invisible shield and a weapon at the same time. Rapid and accurate data on enemy positions transformed naval engagements into a chess match with a new level of complexity. Tactics based on this data enabled the American fleets to fire from greater distances, avoiding perilous close encounters that could previously have ended in disaster. The introduction of radar marked a turning point in naval tactics and the strategic initiative of the United States. It was not just a technological leap, it was a revolution that changed the entire concept of naval warfare. After the Guadalcanal campaign, when radar first demonstrated its effectiveness in real combat conditions, it became an essential part of the armament of all Allied fleets. Soon, within a few years, radar systems began appearing on all types of warships, forever changing the face of naval warfare. Japanese industry, lagging behind technologically, only began actively developing its own systems after it became clear that without them, victory was virtually unattainable. Analysis shows that the reason the Japanese could not quickly develop similar systems was not only technological backwardness, but also a lack of resources, weak coordination of industrial efforts, and the absence of a clear implementation strategy. Unlike the United States, where radar was considered a strategic priority, Japanese industry was unable to quickly adapt and scale their developments, giving Americans a significant lead. As a result, radar changed the tactics of night battles, making them more predictable for those who possess this technology. Enemies, blinded in the dark, found themselves trapped, while American ships, thanks to this invisible network, gained an advantage that was impossible to overestimate. This advantage persisted further. The secrecy of radar systems, their deployment, and development maintained American superiority. In the context of a global conflict where every technology could be decisive, this invisible network of radio waves proved to be the weapon that decided the outcome of naval battles. Subsequently, after the Guadalcanal campaign, radar became a standard, not only for the American fleet, but also for all allies, while Japanese industry, forced to catch up, only began actively developing its own systems when it was already too late. This technological leap became a symbol of a new era in naval warfare, an era when victory is determined not only by the number of ships or guns, but by the ability to see the enemy in the dark before they see you. This is a story about how an invisible wave, sent into the night, changed the course of history, making naval combat more precise, more deadly, and ultimately, more decisive. In a world where darkness and silence could become your enemies or allies, victory belonged to those who mastered the art of seeing where others could not. Radar became the unseen force that elevated the American fleet to a new level, leaving enemies in darkness and fog, relying on a technological breakthrough capable of altering the fate of the war. On the night of November 14th to 15th, 1942, a moment when the fate of the Pacific once again hung in the balance. In this darkness filled with anticipation and danger, the Japanese fleet made another attempt to deliver a powerful blow to American positions at Guadalcanal. Their goal was clear: to strike Henderson Field Airfield once again, a key control point in this strategic theater, and possibly land reinforcements to secure their success or, at the very least, hold their positions. But the secret weapon that could change the course of this battle, radar, a technology few yet understood, became their greatest enemy in this night encounter. Admiral Halsey, commander of the American fleet, understood the importance of reconnaissance and how radar systems could be a decisive factor. His intelligence gathered during the day indicated a possible repeat of Japanese tactics, a night attack aimed at surprise and swift destruction. His team prepared the fleet for the confrontation, equipping ships with radar systems capable of detecting even the faintest echoes from Japanese vessels. While most commanders relied on visual contact, Halsey understood that in the darkness of night, when visibility often dropped to zero, radar would be their shield and weapon. When the clock struck 00:45, the first signals appeared on the screens. In just 15 minutes, like a shadow, the Japanese fleet, 2 columns of ships, moved at a speed that would seem invisible to the naked eye. In the darkness, without stars or moon, and with no visual way to identify silhouettes, radar devices detected their presence with astonishing accuracy. The soft hum of the systems, the barely perceptible squeal of the radar antennas, all of this created the sensation that fate itself was revealing its secrets. The Japanese ships were moving at maximum speed, their course precisely calculated, and Halsey's team waited for the moment to strike. Time was a critical element. At 23:13, when the targets were approximately 18,000 yards away, the American Fleet Command ordered the opening of fire. This was the moment when combat systems, armed with experience and precise radar intelligence, came into action. Thunderous salvos shattered the silence of the night, echoing across the water like a roll of thunder, announcing the beginning of a decisive battle. The Japanese fleet, blinded by its own blindness and unable to counter new technologies, found itself vulnerable. The cruiser Kirishima, one of the main targets, was sunk within minutes, and other Japanese ships sustained serious damage. Soon after this devastating blow, the Japanese fleet began to retreat, their columns scattering into the darkness. leaving behind destruction and chaos. What made this battle so extraordinary? Radar, which was just beginning to be widely adopted at the time, became a key factor in the victory. Why were the Japanese unable to effectively utilize their own radar systems? Perhaps because their systems were not yet sufficiently developed, or because they underestimated the Americans' readiness to employ this technology. While the Americans had already started relying on radar, the Japanese remained in the shadows, either lacking systems or having systems that did not operate at full capacity. This became their weak point, which the Americans exploited with cold precision. The tactical advantage provided by radar proved decisive. It allowed American ships not only to detect the enemy from many kilometers away, but also to accurately fire in complete darkness without visual contact. This data enabled command to react swiftly and make decisions without delay, which was critically important in a nighttime battle. Reaction time is not just a matter of speed, it's a matter of life and death. At that moment, when the enemy could appear or disappear at any second, every instant became decisive. After this night battle, the Japanese fleet began to rethink their tactics for night engagements. The technological revolution initiated by the adoption of radar fundamentally changed strategic approaches. The impact of this technology was felt not only at Guadalcanal, but also in subsequent operations, where night encounters became more predictable and manageable. Evidence from this period shows that radar became an integral part of the American command arsenal, enabling them to conduct night battles with confidence and precision previously unattainable. This battle marked a turning point in naval warfare history. It demonstrated to the world that in war, technology is a weapon capable of changing the outcome of even the darkest and most complex confrontations. Ultimately, it was thanks to radar that the Americans managed to outsmart the enemy, deliver a crushing blow in complete darkness, and emerge victorious. And in this victory, not only in technological achievement but also in command skills, reaction speed, and data accuracy, lay their new strength. That night became a lesson for all sides. Recognizing the advantages of American systems, the Japanese began to rethink their approaches. The influence of radar was felt throughout the Guadalcanal campaign and beyond, forever changing the tactics of night battles. The era when the enemy could suddenly emerge from the darkness was over. Now, thanks to new technologies, the night has become a battlefield where the winner is the one who sees first, reacts faster, and makes better use of their systems. This night proved that in war, just as in any other sphere, victory belongs to those who can see further, act more quickly, and be more precise. In the dark, moonless night, when the silence of the ocean seemed especially ominous, the first powerful salvo was fired. It cut through the silence like a thunderous volley, followed by a series of shells exploding in succession, as if dispersing the darkness, leaving behind only fiery flashes and the roar of tearing metal. Time seemed to slow down as events unfolded on the massive, formidable cruisers, one after another, changing the course of naval history. At 23:30 on November 14th, on the distant horizon, the shadows of the Japanese cruiser Kirishima gathered. He, a symbol of the Japanese fleet, the strength and pride of the Imperial Navy, became a victim of a fateful blow that would forever alter its destiny. On board Kirishima, panic broke out. Flames flickered, metals cracked, and the roar of exploding shells filled the air, creating a terrifying symphony of destruction. The ship, which just minutes earlier was confidently on course, suddenly lost control. The command that had seemed flawless was wiped out by the relentless fire. The vessel, like a wounded beast, flailed about trying to escape the deadly trap, but it was already too late. Within minutes, it sustained fatal damage that ultimately led to its sinking. At that moment, when it seemed everything was over, bright flashes lit up the sky, evidence that defeat was inevitable. The facts speak for themselves. About 20 direct hits were delivered in this battle, 20 strikes that shattered its combat capability. 16-inch shells fired by the American battleships USS Washington and USS South Dakota pierced the cruiser's hull as if swords slicing through the fabric of fate. 5-inch shells, also part of the American arsenal, inflicted additional damage, turning the massive ship into ruins. Evidence of this defeat included destroyed decks, sunken masts, broken metal hulls, and debris scattered across the water. American artillery operated with surgical precision, and their hits left wounds on Kirishima's body that could no longer be stitched up. This was not just a battle for control of the sea. It was the final blow to Japanese strategy in the Pacific. The loss of Kirishima meant the loss of one of the key elements of Japanese naval command, a symbol of their maritime power, and at the same time, a signal that Japanese naval doctrine, based on night battles and lightning-fast attacks, had become unstable. Why then were the Japanese, such skilled naval fighters, unable to continue engaging in night clashes on equal terms? Where did their weakness lie? The answer lies in technology and tactical decisions. Thanks to the implementation of radar, the Americans began receiving information about enemy positions much earlier than the Japanese could. On the night of November 14th to 15th, in conditions where fog, rain, and darkness hampered visual observation, it was the radar stations that provided the Americans with a crucial advantage. They knew about the approaching Japanese ships long before they detected the American vessels. This allowed the American ships to prepare, aim their fire accurately, and avoid dangerous close-range encounters. As a result, the Japanese night attack tactics, based on rapid approaches and surprise strikes, suffered a devastating defeat. The victory at Guadalcanal became one of the first large-scale manifestations of a new era in naval warfare, the era of radar and precise artillery systems. By leveraging technological innovations, the American forces were able not only to destroy the main Japanese cruiser, but also to force the Japanese fleet to reconsider its tactics. After this battle, the Japanese began avoiding night confrontations with the American fleet, preferring more cautious daytime raids or retreat. This was a turning point, when technology and strategy started to play a decisive role. The consequences of this battle were significant. The loss of Kirishima and other ships, casualties among personnel, destroyed vessels, all of this weakened the Japanese fleet and strengthened the U.S. position in the region. Over 1,500 lives were lost, including commanders and crews, either at sea or wounded. More than 10 combat ships were destroyed. Meanwhile, the American fleet lost 3 destroyers, one of which was completely destroyed, and over 242 personnel died in the fighting. These figures seem to indicate parity, the equal toll paid for victory, but in reality, they masked a strategic advantage. The victory at Guadalcanal solidified U.S. control over this key island and turned the tide of the campaign in their favor. It was not just a tactical success, but a strategic victory that changed the entire front line in the Pacific. Analysis shows that it was precisely thanks to the combination of advanced technology, precise tactics, and determined leadership that the Americans were able to turn the tide of events and initiate their offensive operation, which ultimately led to complete control over the region. It was only after this battle that the Japanese fleet began avoiding night engagements with the Americans, understanding that technological superiority and tactical preparedness were the keys to victory. The victory at Guadalcanal became not only a symbol of the changes taking place in naval warfare, but also the beginning of a new era, where radar and accurate artillery determined the outcome of battles. Thus ended the era of Japanese night attacks and ushered in a new epoch, an age of technology, strategy, and resolve, in which the United States established its dominant status on the seas of the Pacific. The war for control over the Pacific reached its climax in the bloody and decisive Battle of Guadalcanal. This confrontation was not just another clash of powerful fleets, but a pivotal test of new technologies, tactics, and strategies. In its shadow, a new era of naval warfare was born, an era in which not only the strength of ships mattered, but also the power of invisible, imperceptible tools, radar. This battle became a turning point that forever changed the face of naval warfare. demonstrating that the future belonged to technological progress, rather than just numbers and firepower. At the center of this historic shift was a name forever associated with the introduction of radar technology: Admiral Willis Lee. When the American fleet approached the shores of Guadalcanal, they already knew this would be no ordinary battle. They faced the challenge of new tactics, new equipment, and a new perspective on war. The fight took place under conditions where nights became battlefields and darkness concealed dangers previously unseen by the human eye. Traditional methods based on visual signals and target identification proved outdated. In this context, radar became revolutionary. The ability to detect and track enemy ships in the dark, without visibility, forever changed naval tactics. Now, ships could engage without risking being caught in a trap due to night blindness. The use of radar was not just an added option. It transformed the entire concept of naval confrontation. Soon after the Guadalcanal campaign, the Americans began widespread deployment of radar systems across all branches of the armed forces. These technologies became the core of a new strategy: tactics based on precise data, rapid response, and risk minimization. Eyewitness accounts, documents, and modern research show that it was radar that allowed Americans to detect Japanese ships long before they appeared on visual sight, to fire with greater accuracy, and most importantly, to avoid traps that had previously ensnared their opponents. The losses suffered by the Japanese fleet, which were especially significant in this battle, had a devastating impact on their capabilities in the Pacific. It was a blow to their strategic positions, losses of ships, crews, and resources. But more importantly, it was a series of mistakes made by the Japanese command afterward. A lack of modern technology, an inability to quickly adapt to new combat conditions, and a reluctance to retrain their crews, all contributed to further miscalculations. Ultimately, the Japanese fleet was unable to catch up with the technological level of the Americans. Their systems remained in the shadow of new advancements, and their strategies became outdated. This battle demonstrated that victory at sea is not only a matter of numbers and firepower, but also the result of the ability to apply new technologies. It became a lesson for future generations of military strategists, a reminder that technological progress is a weapon capable of shifting the balance of power. The impact of the Guadalcanal campaign is still felt today. Its lessons are applied in modern conflicts, and historical experience serves as an example of how innovations in weaponry and tactics can be decisive factors in the outcome of a battle. Today, we can say that radar has become a cornerstone of modern naval strategy. It not only changed the course of a single engagement, but also laid the foundation for the development of an entire system of strategic superiority. Reflecting on the Battle of Guadalcanal, we see how technological progress can fundamentally reshape notions of warfare, making it more precise, more deadly, and more unpredictable. This battle became not only a historic event, but also a confirmation that in modern conflict, victory goes to those who are the first to utilize new innovations, who know how to implement and apply them in practice. Even today, years after those events, the impact of the Guadalcanal campaign is felt as a living example, how an effective combination of courage, tactics, and technology can change the course of history. Looking into the past shows that it was precisely the adoption of radar, this invisible yet powerful shield, that played a key role in the victory, which was not only achieved in battle, but also shaped the future of naval warfare. This lesson contains not only a story of victory, but also a message to future generations. Armament and tactics go hand in hand, and the future belongs to those who are not afraid to move forward, who can see the invisible and use it for the good of their country.